I painted some creamy humans and I'm gonna show them to you. Hey guys, today I want to talk about some paintings that I made. When I moved from New York to Los Angeles in 2015, I spent about a year painting in a studio in East Hollywood. The first few paintings were animal-human hybrids, which I have spoken about in an earlier episode. But after painting human bodies with animal heads, I began being drawn to painting humans in their entirety. But painting a human face as opposed to an animal face kind of scared me in the beginning. I felt like a human face would be so specific and so definitive and that it might change the spirit of the work. But I really did feel drawn to it, so I started to move in that direction. And that explains why the first few paintings in this series have human heads but are wearing masks. That was kind of my segue from animal head to human head with mask onto ultimately a human face. And the paintings that then followed in this series are all ultimately variations on a self-portrait. The big bun of hair on top of the head would appear very often, and that's a hairdo that I wore a lot during that period in my life. And I'm actually starting to wear that hairdo again now that my hair is getting a little longer. These paintings were all done in acrylic paint on canvas, and I would first sketch the piece on paper and then transfer the sketch to canvas and then trace the outlines of my sketch with a black acrylic paint marker. And then I'd add the color with the paint. My color palette for this series was very soft and creamy and pastel-y, and I'd create these flat surfaces of color by painting several very thin layers of paint on top of each other until I'd built up enough pigment to make it completely saturated, but without showing any visible brush strokes. All in all in this series, and I count this series as the paintings I made in this style from 2015 to 2016. There are 17 pieces in different sizes. Although I certainly could, this episode would get really long if I spoke about each of those paintings in detail, so I'm just gonna go into a few of them today. The first one I want to talk about is this one. It's called Pappagallo, which means parrot in Italian. As a kid, I would spend my summers in Italy with my family, specifically in Tuscany, in a small town that was really chock full of colorful Italian characters. One couple that I remember very fondly was Adolfo and Peppa, and they had a dog named Leo, who I adored, and they also had a parrot simply named Pappagallo. Pappagallo spoke a little bit, and I remember him being able to say ciao. In this painting, Pappagallo is sitting on my shoulder, almost like a trusty sidekick or a pirate's parrot. The painting also includes an homage to Mexican artist Frida Kahlo, who has inspired me endlessly ever since I was a little kid. Frida, whose self-portraits are the most affecting paintings I know, would sometimes paint what was on her mind in a painting by depicting it directly on her forehead in the self-portrait. As an homage to Frida, I painted an echo of the same face on the girl's forehead. Next, I'd like to show you a duo. This is Carrot Man and Radish Woman. I painted these two pieces simultaneously with the two canvases next to each other to make sure that the colors would match exactly. I often mix paints myself in order to create that exact unique color I'm looking for. And once that batch is done, or if it dries up because it's sitting around for a few days, it's really difficult to recreate that same exact mix and color again. So if I would have painted one of these paintings in its entirety first and then moved on to the other painting a few days later, it's not so likely that I would have been able to mirror the colors as exactly as I wanted. These two pieces were inspired by old Swedish children's books, specifically the work of Paul Ströyer, who was a Swedish-Danish artist who contributed some really beautiful and playful and creative illustrations for children's books by Lennart Hellsing, and I grew up loving those books. I also turned these paintings into pillows, which live on our guest bed. The last painting I want to speak a bit more in depth about today is this one. It's called Home is Where the Heart Is. The inspiration for this piece was the idea of a human snail who carries her home with her on her back wherever she goes. I've moved quite a few times in my life, both internationally and domestically, so uprooting myself and relocating and making a new home for myself in an entirely new environment is something I've done many times. The idea of home being always with you and that the sense and feeling of home is something that you can carry with you wherever you go is a really comforting thought to me. The interpretation by many that this piece is depicting a woman holding up the weight of the world on her back is also something I welcome. I think that's rather apt. Since this series, my paintings have expanded and they no longer only reflect depictions of myself, and they're also not bound to canvas anymore. I previously did an episode on one of my newer paintings on wood, which is this piece here. It's called Tillsammans, and if you didn't see that episode, I'll link to it in the description below. I'm still enjoying meshing symbolism and iconography and bold color and humans and nature and animals in my work using that flat aesthetic that I'm really fond of. Those were some of the paintings from my Creamy Humans series, and here comes a quick medley with a few more. And that's something I made. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit a thumbs up and leave a comment below. And why not hit subscribe? I'll see you next week. Bye.